Wow, he's already level 12. We are really going to watch this replay. There's not much else going on here. It's a very fast pajama man. Look at his face.
Terrifying.
Well, it's certainly been a long wait, hasn't it? A year and a half to be exact, with the final results of the 2022 VGU poll announced in February of last year. Udyr, the animal spirit, one of League's oldest champions, won said poll
In a landslide.
finally getting his long-deserved VGU. Forever League of Legends' Aquaman.
Blah, 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 blah.
A character so awful looking with abilities so useless he became a laughingstock of the fandom. But no longer. After finally getting a prediction right that he was coming out in August, the Udyr Rework is finally here, and it's Harry. You're a Harry wizard, Harry. Okay, that might be doing it a bit of a disservice. This rework, while it does get some things wrong, also gets a lot of things right. But so do a lot of reworks. So does that make the Udyr rework good or bad? I already explained this before in my Mundo video, so I'll keep this part brief. To better understand the pros and cons of the Udyr rework, we have to go over 4 main factors. Lore. Has the rework either successfully reinvented the champion's purpose in the universe, or how well has the story been progressed forward? Design. Is the new design not only an upgrade from the original, but does it better encapsulate the champion's thematic potential? Visuals. From voice lines, model quality, animations, and skins, how well is the design incorporated into League itself? And gameplay. Was the champion brought up to modern standards without losing what made them so iconic in the first place? From these criteria, we can more accurately assess the successes and failures of the Udyr rework, starting with the changes to his As far as narrative goes, Udyr isn't too far off from what he used to be, and that's probably because his lore was already really f***ing great! Udyr's narrative rework, while not entirely the same, is more along the lines of an Akali-style rework, acting more as story progression instead of reinventing it. To that end, what's different? Well, for starters, he's a 2022 champion now, after all, so he's been promoted from a fairly powerful Freljordian shaman to the most powerful spirit walker in all of Runeterra. And to that end, we have official confirmation that Udyr is not just limited to the 4 basic animals we've seen him use for so long, but all spirits, from all lands, even including the immense power of the Freljordian demigods, Ornn, Volibear, Anavia, the Iron Boar, and the Seal Sister. Representations of the primordial elements in nature, and Udyr can channel that primordial power. But this power comes with a cost. Insanity! In his younger days, Udyr could barely control himself. He could feel the needs and wants of all the spirits around him, constantly battling over control of his own mind. In both versions of the story, albeit in different ways, he becomes a member of the Winter's Claw tribe, the most survival-intensive and violent of the 3 major Freljordian tribes, through which he would meet Calkia, his first love. Of course, like any crazy power, the curse came a knockin' eventually, spiritually overrun by a pack of diseased Rimefang wolves. Not Merc wolves like on Summoner's Rift, although those exist in Freljord too. In his animalistic rage, he nearly killed a child, causing his banishment from the Winter's Claw. And while Calkia would visit him frequently and even lift his banishment once she became chieftain herself, Udyr refused to return, still struggling to keep the spirits under control. But just like in his current story, his introduction and eventual friendship with Lee Sin is what saves him. Although this time it might be, a little bit more than friendship. Lee Sin, struggling with similar spiritual problems, offers to train Udyr in his homeland of Ionia. Udyr agrees, trains with Lee Sin for many a year, fought back Noxian invaders, learned to harness the Ionian spirits around him, and together with Lee Sin, learned to subdue and control their powers. He learned the balance of Ionia and sought to bring that balance back to the Freljord. I wouldn't really consider the aftermath of colonialism and a multitude of civil wars as balanced, but you do you, I guess. And the rest is pretty much the same as before. His initial return to Freljord in A Walk with the Voices, still canon. His encounter with the Volibear in the beginning of his corruption, still canon. And now our brand new Udyr is what he looks like in modern day. One of the new things they add to his story, however, is the aid of the Seal Sister. After attempting to fight back the Volibear's corruption and many rigorous tests by the Seal Sister in disguise, she gives him her blessing, clearing his mind once more. Now returned to the Winter's Claw by his daughter's side, although it's probably not his actual daughter anymore. It's probably Calkia's daughter, so he's more of like an adoptive surrogate father. It's confusing, they word it weird. He, as well as the other shamans, believe that the Freljord is dying. Why? Because the spirits are dying. Why? Because of those damn liberal, Avarosans, of course, trying to unite the Freljord under a banner of peace, upsetting the balance and the spirits. Yeah, that's a good theory. Surely it couldn't be the unspeakable interdimensional horrors beyond our comprehension trying to destroy all of reality. Or anything. So yeah, Udyr's lore, while it didn't change very much, filled in a couple gaps and moved it forward. I do think the Seal Sister bit, well, cool, is a little bit tacked on at the end, basically retreading what he already accomplished in Ionia. And his reasoning for actually rejoining the Winter's Claw is, it's pretty stupid, I'm gonna be honest. He literally has a voice line with Belveth. It should be obvious why the Freljord is dying.
You stupid.
But that doesn't stop what was already so good about Udyr's old lore being as exceptional as it is. Don't fix it if it ain't broke kind of vibe. The real challenge is gonna be backing up that amazing lore with a brand new Udyr's a bit of a pickle in terms of design, not only because he's old as bones, but because old Udyr is still technically canon. In fact, we actually have 4 different canon versions of Udyr at our disposal that gives us a pretty great visual timeline through his journey. Classic Udyr is the younger version of himself before leaving to train with Lee Sin and Ionia. Spirit Guard Udyr is canon too, and it's what he actually looked like while training with Lee Sin and Ionia. Legends of Runeterra Udyr is also canon and what he looked like shortly after returning to the Freljord, and now current reworked Udyr is what he looks like in the modern day, many years after returning, slowly descending further into his wild side once again. So how does Udyr's design reflect on where the story has led him thus far? Let's get one thing out of the way first, fellas. He's not fat. It's not even a dad bod. It's quite the opposite, in fact. Udyr is probably the most accurate representation in League of Legends of real-world strength that we have. Champions like Set and Braum are big old hunky buff dudes, but these are not dad bods, despite what Riot might tell you in their official media. This is what a bodybuilder looks like. A body type meant to look strong rather than actually be strong. And sure, people with this body type are still strong, they're just not as strong as these guys. They have a very similar body type to Udyr, huh? And I love that they gave him this body type for a couple reasons. One, that it's a body type sorely underrepresented in media as a whole. The only one coming even close to it in League of Legends would be Gangplank in his classic skin, although they kind of mucked it up in the Ruin King game. And listen, no slander to that game, okay? It's fantastic. I take most of the designs for that game over League any day of the week, but Gangplank, I think that necklace might have been laced with roids. And number 2, well again, this isn't a dad bod body type, it has a similar shape to one. And that works really well, seeing as Udyr is quite older now and he's, well, a dad. And beyond this body type, I think the new design really nails it for the most part. The wild, unkept hair visualizing his untamed animalistic nature with a single braided feather symbolizing that he has at least a little bit of structure. His outfit perfectly Freljordian with beads and bandages from Lee Sin representing his time in Ionia. I do think yet another Freljordian champion being shirtless is a bit much, but at least he uses it to his advantage, showing off the tattoos of the 4 main Freljordian demigods that he uses for his in-game stances. No tattoo for the Seal Sister though, despite being one of the few Freljordian demigods he actually interacts with in his story. Riot even promised that she'd be his passive.
You promised. Remember? No.
Altogether, this new design for Udyr is a fantastic upgrade, although they didn't really have anywhere to go but up. And I know what you're thinking, but Nick, what about the antlers? I like the antlers, why did they remove them? And yes, I like the antlers too, but I do agree with Riot's decision to remove them. The antlers combined with the tattoos, messy hair, and particle effects on the stances would have made the designs way too visually cluttered. Plus, it would have made the already massive hassle that is creating Udyr skins even more complicated. Just look at Warwick, for example. In every single skin, the designers have to figure out a way to incorporate the back canisters without making it look stupid as shit. Sometimes to great effect. Others not. Of course, that's only half the battle. A great design doesn't mean anything if they can't deliver on it in the Well, now that we've got a solid foundation for story and design, how well does that translate into League itself? First off, the voice. Old Udyr's voice was kind of,
If PETA asks, this fur is fake.
Yeah, it's about as grab a random guy off the street and record a minute of voice lines classic League as you can get, but Udyr on the other hand delves a lot deeper into the gruff and wild side of his character, and thankfully, the same voice actor providing our updated look at Udyr in Legends of Runeterra reprised their role for League of Legends.
Blood and death for the Winter's Claw!
Sejuani, do not make me your enemy, please.
I would commend Riot's ability to be consistent across their IPs if they, did any more than 5% of the time. But this one is just great, really nailing who his character actually is now. References to the Winter's Claw, the Freljordian demigods, and his
My most worthy and most beloved opponent.
relationship with Lee Sin. And while not exactly a voice line, his laugh brings me a smile each and every time I listen to it. So, voice lines are amazing, but how about that model? Well, besides chronic scoliosis, the model looks pretty good. We already saw this a bit earlier with Stargar and Akali, but Riot is really stepping up their game when it comes to facial texturing and animations. I wish the same could be said about his hair, but beyond the texturing, the animations for Udyr are just phenomenal. As usual with modern champions, there's a lot of squash and stretch to really emphasize the movement and power of his attacks. I think they went a little overboard with the volley bear stance in particular, but the short run on Ram stance, the sturdiness of Iron Boar autos, and the little spin he does on Phoenix stance is all great stuff. It's still a little bit rougher on the edges in some places, the back especially. With so much going on everywhere else in the design, it feels like a large amount of dead space. And I know it's a bit contradictory to when I said I think the antlers being removed was a good thing, but really all you need is is either for the tattoos to stay while he's in stance mode, or for some back hair, just something to fill up the space. Thankfully, this is a problem that Riot said they'll be fixing, and we'll probably learn about it while I'm editing about it in this video. Like always. So all in all, the Udyr Rework team did a pretty bang-up job bringing our favorite Spirit Walker to life in League of Legends. But hold a minute, I'm not done yet. I didn't do this with Mundo because his skin count is oddly high for a champion of his personality, but Udyr has only 5 skins, and throughout his development, we were told that a large part as to why it was taking so long was because of his skins. For those unaware, Udyr doesn't get skins very frequently. He hasn't had one in 3 years, in fact, and that's because to make a modern Udyr skin of modern standards, they essentially have to make 4 skins in one. And to Riot, that's just not worth it. It takes too much time and too many resources for something that ultimately will not yield as significant a profit as releasing 5 Leona skins within a 14-month time frame. Really makes you wonder why they did it to the fucking map. But not only did the new Udyr skins fulfill this promise of being 4 skins in one, many of them went one step beyond. Dragon Oracle, Primal, and Reginald? I don't really know who this is. Not only do they have unique forms for each stance, but also entirely unique base forms, ones you only see at the beginning of the game and upon respawn. That's so much extra work for something so trivial, I can't help but appreciate the hell out of it. Black Belt and Reginald use the same particle effects as the default skins, however, understandably so as they're cheaper skins, but this was also a great way of demonstrating how Riot figured out how to make Udyr's stance particles transferable between cosmetics. It really makes me wish we could have had a traditional Udyr skin or even a Legends of Runeterra inspired one using the default particle effects. It's not much, but I miss traditional skins functioning as a playable time capsule for a champion's past.
Oh, hell no.
But now, the big one. Spirit Guard Udyr, the first VGU of an ultimate skin.
Dude, seriously?
Shut the fuck up, no one cares.
Like I said earlier, yes, this skin is canon. It's what Udyr looked like while he was training with Lee Sin in Ionia, so yeah, so hair is contagious, I guess. But I love the attention to details in the stances, especially immortalizing the old Udyr by keeping the original stances. So even though new Udyr is now Bear, Boar, Ram, and Cryo Phoenix, Spirit Guard Udyr is still the classic Tiger, Turtle, Bear, and normal Phoenix.
I'm going normal.
And while I can't confirm, I'm fairly certain that these are supposed to be Ionian spirits now, because Tiger sure as hell looks a lot like a sacred protector. And on that, the fact that the spirits themselves have their own unique animations and models, they even each have their own unique dance, how cool is that? And let us not forget what is essentially Super Saiyan forms for each of the stances once you've put at least 4 points into it. And granted, old Spirit Guard Udyr did this too, but not to this extreme level of particle effects and power on display we have now. The one knock I have against this skin is really only a trivial one. In old Spirit Guard Udyr, Tiger stance was orange and Bear stance was blue, but with the new version, those colors are switched. And you might be saying, well, that's because the skin designers probably wanted some level of color consistency across all the skins. What used to be Tiger stance is now Volibear stance, and that's blue in every other skin line, right? Except Dragon Oracle Udyr Volibear stance is still orange, so I don't know what's going on. Other than that though, this is a phenomenal skin. I still don't think it's worth the ultimate skin price, but frankly I think Elementalist Lux is the only one that is. So that leaves us with one last thing. A rework could have the best new design you've ever seen, but League of Legends is a video game after all. So one of, if not the most important part of a VGU, is successfully modernizing their So, the gameplay. It's a very important factor when it comes to creating a successful rework, and it can be tackled in a multitude of ways. You can either A, completely scrap the original champion's kit and build it from the ground up, going so far as to sometimes change the entire class of the champion. B, keep most of the original champion's kit intact while overhauling around 50% of it. Or C, essentially keeping the old champion the same while adding a couple twists and tools to their arsenal. That last one's a bit vague though, because it's kind of a wide spectrum. Warwick falls under this category as he does the exact same thing he used to, but in new and interesting ways he couldn't before. But New Mundo also falls under this category, just at the other end of the spectrum, because it's the exact same champion he used to be. There's a reason his play rate stagnated after only a few weeks of his rework's release, because he moves the same, plays the same, and his skill expression is the same. Well, an upgrade for sure, there wasn't nearly enough to make it feel like a true upgrade. And unfortunately, I think Udyr is closer to the Mundo end of the spectrum than Warwick. Not nearly as severe though. The awakened stance and different passive do alter many of his play patterns and decision making, but at the end of the day, you're still Udyr, you're running headstrong to the middle of a fight and auto attack people. And to that end, yeah, pretty good job of preserving the original Udyr, but they did add a couple unique twists. The awakened mechanic in specific is just really fucking cool. The big burst of damage on Volibear stance, the enormous shield on Boar, the CC immunity on Ram, and the giant AoE circle of cold on Phoenix. It just adds a level of decision making Udyr didn't have before. You can't mash your face on the keyboard like old Udyr, you have to be careful not to accidentally waste your awaken on an unfavorable stance. It's a long cooldown too, so whatever awaken you choose to use, you have to use it wisely, because odds are you might only get one in that team fight. But But while I love the Awaken part of Udyr's new passive, the other parts, I'm less favorable about. For those uncultured, Udyr's old passive was Monkey's Agility.
Monkey!
Giving him ramping attack speed and movement speed with each stance swap up to 3 times. This was here mainly to support Udyr's playstyle of being a slippery bastard. You run in, stun, land a couple hits, and run away. It's the reason Udyr was able to get away a lot of the time. It wasn't just because of Bear Stance, it was Bear Stance in combination with Monkey's Agility. But that part of his passive is completely gone, replaced instead with after using a stance, his next 2 auto attacks grant bonus attack speed, which is just Lee Sin. And normally that wouldn't bother me. In fact, I think it's kind of cool they have an in-universe connection and all. But Riot already did that passive this year. They gave it to Bel'Veth. I get recycling old abilities. We're at the 160 champion mark now, but this just feels incredibly boring. Granted, Udyr does have a better use for it than Bel'Veth does, as these 2 auto attacks also lower the cooldown of Awaken. So the general idea is to be constantly swapping stances so you can get your Awaken back up as soon as possible. So in the jungle and team fights, this works great, and in fact it's barely even noticeable. But for laning, it feels really off. My friend Jellyfish Rabe described it best to me, and after some thought, I've come to agree. Udyr doesn't really have stances anymore, he has abilities. And that might sound a bit contradictory, but in fact, it actually makes a lot of sense. With old Udyr, you could stay in any stance for any given amount of time and still receive an effect. Every 3rd attack on Tiger was bonus damage, every 3rd attack on Turtle was healing, and every 3rd attack on Phoenix was a cone of fire. New Udyr doesn't have this. Phoenix does a big AoE circle damage and 2 enhanced auto attacks, but after that,
Mommy, it's over.
you auto attack just the same as if you had no stance at all. And that goes the same for his other stances. Bear Stance, bonus damage is only on the first 2 autos. Boar Stance, healing is only on the first 2 autos. You see what I'm getting at here? After the first 2 auto attacks, the effect of the stance is over, so it leaves them feeling like abilities. But besides that, Bear and Ram just feel kinda slightly worse than they used to. Volley Bear Stance, which was old Tiger Stance, doesn't really do much damage unless you awaken it. And with the removal of Monkey's Agility, the new rapidly decaying movement speed on Ram Stance, which was old Bear Stance, feels incredibly slow now. I will give credit though that the new Phoenix stance feels great. Will I miss the cone? A little bit, yeah, but new Phoenix truly feels like the powerhouse of the stances it was always meant to be. It's pretty obvious Ratchet to push Udyr more towards the AP Juggernaut playstyle, but to me a lot of Udyr's charm was his ability to go either AD Tiger Max or AP Phoenix Max, the former of which was my favorite playstyle unfortunately, so my thoughts on his gameplay are a little mixed. He still feels like the same champion at the end of the day, just some aspects about him are a little bit better and a little bit worse than before. I will say he feels a lot more satisfying to play than he did before, but that could be down to upgraded animations. And while PvE isn't the best place to judge this kind of stuff, we won't know how good he really is until he hits live servers. So at the end of the day, is the Udyr rework good or bad?
Say the line, Bart!
It's so close to perfection, it hurts. As a package, I think the Udyr rework is simply amazing, from lore to design to visuals and even gameplay. Obviously, I think there's a couple things wrong with it, but those things are so minor it's actually upsetting how close this was to being a perfect rework. If I could give it a rating, I would give it a 8 frozen chickens out of 8. But as always, these are just my silly opinions. Be sure to tell me yours down in the comments. What do you fellas think of the Udyr rework? Do you hate it? Do you love it? Do you love it?
I do.
In any case, I'll see you guys next time. Either next September when the Skarner rework will probably release, or in the next video.